couple of years ago, I went to the Foursquare Convention, and they were talking about the mandate to build churches on the East Coast. And they stood up and they talked about the epidemic of churches and how very few churches there were on the East Coast. And I used to listen to that presentation that they would give and the different leaders. And my heart was always so gripped when I heard of the lack of a great church, because for years and years, the Lord's put a passion in my heart that one day this church would get to the place to where we can plant another great church for the kingdom of God. And I used to hear the pitch and the appeal, and my heart was so stirred, and the numbers were just piling up. And for years, probably since the, I believe it was a Washington, D.C. conference, this has been in my spirit for so long. And God began to put a great passion in my heart for New York City in ways I've never, maybe because we were there September 11th. My wife and I saw the Twin Towers fall right in front of us. It was as if maybe God called us to be there during that time to see the pain of all that was going on in that city. And for years, we were just kind of like, okay, well, it's in our heart, but it's something that we'll just never do. One day, one week, God put a burning passion in my spirit, said, I just want you to go to New York City and pray down the streets and just see what God might do. I just want you to go and pray. I called Dave Hanley. I said, dude, let's just go with me. We'll walk down there, and we'll just walk down the street. And honestly, in my mind, I didn't want to do. I know God was speaking to us to do something in New York one day, but I never wanted to do it. I never even wanted to try it. It was the furthest thing from my mind. And so reluctantly, just trying to please God and go home and never think about it again, we went to New York City and we walked down the streets. We walked into 40 different theaters, and every single leader of the theater was there at the time. It was unbelievable, the kind of contacts God was giving us. We had nothing but a cell phone, walking up down Times Square, just meeting different people and just seeing, just say, God, if it's your will, you'll open up a door. And if it's not, we're going to go home and we're going to consider it. That's how obvious we put out there to God. Finally, we went to a place in 42nd and Broadway, a theater where I got this inspiration years ago when I went to London, England, and saw what London Hillsong has been able to do in downtown London. They went in there and got one of the most famous musical theaters in the whole city. And they went in there and they made a deal, one of the first churches probably ever to do it, because theaters don't rent out to churches. There's a huge cultural dynamic difference right there. And they talked to the people, and the people agreed to allow them to have theater. And then I went back and I said, well, we can never do that because New York has services they have musicals on Sunday. You'll never be able to do anything any other day of the week. And finally, my wife said one day, she said, well, Thursday night is a bad night to have church in the church world, but look at the crowd we have on Thursday night. She said, you don't have to, why are you confined to just think in a certain way? And saying that you can never do anything because your number one commitment, obviously, for the rest of your life is to be here at this church. And so the idea just kind of came and went, and we just kind of moved forward from there. And we walked, and we met this lady from 42nd and Broadway. And one of the most famous landmark theaters. It's unbelievable. We walked in the building, right on Broadway, right underneath the ball drop of New York City Times Square. And I talked to the lady, and God developed a divine connection. To make a long story short, we probably came up with a situation where we could actually be in a theater in New York City for 25% of what it would cost any other theater on Broadway. It was the most sovereign miracle, as if the lady felt like she was appointed for such a time as this. And relationships, and she started sending us email telling us, the owner of this secular theater, how we ought to evangelize New York City and give us all these, and she got so excited about it. And I said, God, I just don't know if we can do it or not. And then I went back and I said, and I shouldn't have done this because God was already revealing himself everywhere. People were we were walking up to people and talking to them, and they're saying, please come to New York City. There's maybe only one choice that's even down there. We need someone to come, please. Now, there's a whole youth dynamic that hasn't been reached, and just going on. And we're just like, well, we got too much going on and too busy, and the risk-taking spirit wasn't in my heart. And I went back to the Foursquare leaders, and I talked to them, and I said, I'm just throwing this out here. And I actually threw it out really mellow because I really still didn't want to do it. And when I threw it out to them, the Foursquare leader said, this is God. This is the Lord. This is what we've been dreaming of. And they started writing checks out, and they gave us a grant of several $100,000 right on the spot. They committed that money, and they said, this is of the Lord. If you don't do this, this is what you have to do. And I'm totally stunned. And then we went back one more time, and I said, well, there's issues with unions, and you have to hire so many union people to do a service. We don't have the money that Broadway does, and the union directors, we're going to work with you to where you can basically do it for a minimal cost. That when we saw the number, it was staggering. I was looking for one more way out for them to come back with a cost that was too much, and we came up with this little bitty old offer that was so small and easy to afford. We got so excited, and then I began to walk the streets, And the Lord spoke a word to me and said, if you don't take a risk, I'm going to hold back my blessing. And last year, I began to see, in 6 months, when the moment we started thinking about reaching outside of ourselves, God began to send some of the biggest checks that have ever come into Angel's Temple in the history of our church. Financial provision started coming in waves. The moment I started acting on the obedience, financial stuff started coming in. Things started happening. Supernatural provision when we started thinking about the vision. Then I called my dad and talked to him, and he was like, you know, when we were in Phoenix and we talked about going to LA and doing a church, he said our church grew 30%. In 1 year, when we were obedient to God in Phoenix and we stepped out and did something that was bigger than us, his church grew 30% in 1 year when they acted on the things that God wanted them to do. But then the question came back to my heart. I said, what are the people in LA going to think? I don't want them to get weird perceptions of my life. I tell them my life is here, and I'll tell you again, God has called me to Los Angeles for the rest of my life. This is my life. There's no place like the Dream Center. There's no place where you can take in hundreds of people. You know, in New York, we just have a theater there, and, you know, because of space, if people get saved and born again, we can put them on a plane, and we can send them back to L.A., and they can go through discipleship here and fly them. There's no need to reinvent the wheel and all the stuff we do here, and we just have church there and reach out to people on the street and make a difference and just do the best we possibly can.